War is declared on retro. All this and more on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
$1 million retro.
The C64 is a Theramin.
Japanese minister declares war on old-fashioned technology.
All this and more coming up on today's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello everyone, we've got Chris, we've got Dave, and for those watching, you'll see Dave's cat Johnny is joining him, although for how long he'll stay with us, I don't know. But he always likes to make an appearance. Hello, Johnny. Just a reminder for anyone who might be choosing this, our 91st show, to join us for the very first time. This is This Week in Retro, where we like to chat about the week in retro. That includes the news headlines as submitted by you to our subreddit at reddit.com/r/This Week in Retro, and a general catch up between us on what we've been doing. And then we like to see your comments under the show on YouTube or on whatever podcast app you like to use, or even on Reddit, and see what everyone's up to and share our love of the hobby of retro. So I'll start, if you like, with this week. What I've been up to is I've had a incredible week of donations. Now, I put a video out to my patrons this week, which will be public next week. A really kind guy called Ian basically donated his entire retro collection. And when I say entire collection, it filled up my estate car, it filled up Mark Fix's Stuff's van. It took 2 vehicles to get it all over to the cave. Quite where I'm going to put it all, I don't know.
Public this week, though, Neil. Public by the time that people watch this, they should be able to see the video.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting my timings all out. By the time this show goes out, that will be on the channel public. Yes, well done, Dave. Good catch. So you can see that. However, what's been going on behind the scenes is just the day after I collected those, we had a donation from a very kind chap called Lee, and I think he sent now 7 boxes in total of mostly Amiga games, big box Amiga games, and in amongst it were some real treasures, including big box CD32 games, because you normally find you've only got the dual cases. So there's things like Brutal Sports Football, big box on the CD32, I think James Bond 3, I want to say, big box, loads of stuff in there. It's a really kind donation. And then, just as if that wasn't enough, another donation comes in on Saturday. A chap brought along another car full of incredibly rare retro. And we'll talk about this a bit more in one of our stories this week. But let me just tell you a few of the things that were included, because I cannot wait to make videos about them and show them to people. Okay, a Magnavox Odyssey boxed with all the bits in there.
Oh.
We're talking 1972, the first ever commercial games console. That's where it all began for gaming. I never thought I'd own one of those. That's a real museum piece. An FM Towns Car Marty. Have you come across those before? It's an FM Towns. So you remember the FM Towns is that nice looking tower machine with the CD drive in the front, the first machine with the CD drive as standard.
The ears on the monitor, is that right?
Yeah, if you've got the official monitor, there's ears on the monitor. Well, they made a version that slots into your car. What? So it replaces your car stereo. And then you pull it out, and it's also got the kit with it. There's a sort of home conversion kit, so you can then plug it in at home and just use it as a regular machine at home. You'll like this, Dave, considering you're wearing your Ultima 6 t-shirt today. The FM Towns is the only machine with a talkie version of Ultima 7. I think it's Ultima 7.
Ultima 6. Ultima
6, is it?
How good is the speech, though, in Ultima 6 talkie on the FM Towns?
It's terrible. It's worse than your local amateur dramatics club. You know, I think Richard Garriott himself is in there as well, his voice.
Because I know that you can, I think, unless I've dreamt this, I think with through NuV, which I think is the equivalent of Exalt for Ultima 6, I'm on shaky ground here. I think you can play it on Scum VM with the voice acting taken from FM Towns and inserted into it. Yeah.
You can. I've done this. I can't remember which engine it is that you use, whether it's Scum VM or Exalt or NuV. But you can use the ripped voices from the FM Towns and then the PC version, so you get kind of the best, in quotes, of both worlds. It's quite a fun thing to do, yeah. And I think you can also use updated portraits of the people in the game, and it sort of mixes and matches all the best bits. Anyway, also in this donation, PC Engine with a CD-ROM. There's just so much. And I put it in the arcade because I don't quite know where I'm going to put it yet. So this has really prompted me to say I've got to sort out the storeroom again. I've got to make space. I've got to decide. It's that question that comes up every week. What do I need to keep? What do I need to get rid of? What's important? What do you collect? Why do you collect? It's raising all these questions again. So I think that the whole experience of sorting this out is worth sharing with people. And boy, have we got a collection. It really does feel like a museum now with some of these items. Yeah.
I think what people perhaps don't understand about the cave is that the storeroom's not big at all. You don't have a lot of space. You make the assumption there's a big room down the back with loads in it, but having visited it, it's really not very big at all. You're going to need to work really hard to make the best use of that storage and avoid having just a clutter of stuff that is years deep before you manage to get to it.
Yeah. Well, the ideal way of storing things in the cave is storing them in such a way that people can see them. So glass cabinets, out on display, they don't all have to be hands-on. So I think my goal is to make as much of that space usable as display space and still keep a small storeroom, but the more we can show people, the better. Anyway, let's not go any further down that rabbit hole. Chris, tell us about your week.
Well, look, see if you guys can guess what I've been doing, actually. I've just put in the show notes STSC.
Well, the Atari ST Supreme computer.
Super cleaning.
The last word is completed.
He's writing.
The last word is completed. I've completed a game.
STS completed.
STS. Stunt. No.
SDS
Save.
Completed.
Save
STS.
the sheep.
Sausages.
Right, one more word.
Simon the Sorcerer.
Yes, Simon the Sorcerer. I've gone through it. Enough of this. Chris doesn't do point and click adventures. I've done one. So my mate Shane lent me Simon the Sorcerer. Ever since I brought back a CD32 from the UK, he lent me his power supply very kindly, and because I don't have one, and Simon the Sorcerer. So that's the only game I've had access to. I did use a walkthrough, and I'm glad I did, because there's no way I'd have been clicking on some of the areas of the screen that I needed to look for. Absolutely no way. But yeah, it was an enjoyable experience. I can see the appeal. But yeah, definitely enjoyed having a handhold through it. So it was really good. So yeah, thank you, Shane, so much for that loan.
How did you use the walkthrough? Did you try to do it yourself and only go to the walkthrough when you're stuck, or did you use it like following a recipe?
No, didn't. Well, that's not true. I did have a couple of days before I looked up a walkthrough. I did just have a poke around and got as far as the center of the forest. No, actually the tower, but didn't have the right things to ring the bell, that kind of thing. So I was going to use a walkthrough anyway. And then Shane came around with a full printout of one, and it was the same one I'd found. So I'll put a link to the walkthrough that I used in the show notes if anybody's interested. But yeah, it was really cool. Neil?
What's it like in terms of dead ends? Because you know how some Sierra games, you can find yourself in a situation where you can't get the object that you need to then progress because you missed it earlier in the game. Is it a pretty well-rounded game? So I've played it, but I haven't completed it, so I haven't played it in a huge amount of depth.
Yeah, so I found that it was a fairly laid-back game in terms of there was no real fear of the character dying. If you messed up in a room, it just restarted you in that room. There was a couple of activities that were sort of time-based. You had to click on the right thing in a certain amount of seconds. Otherwise, like the mummy, I think, was the main thing that kept getting me. So I had to retry that a couple of times. There it is. Dave's holding up a big box copy. But other than that, in terms of dead ends, no, because I was following a walkthrough, I didn't really come across that. There was one place where I had forgotten to pick something up, or I hadn't quite understood the instructions, but the game allowed me to go back to the location that I needed to collect the more coins using the magnet on the rope was what I had to do there. You have to fish a couple of times for the coins in the dragon's hole. And then it's absolutely fine.
Simon the Sorcerer had a pretty significant patch to it after it came out to iron out a lot of the bugs, and there weren't a huge amount of bugs, but just little tweaks and things like that. But I imagine by the time it got to the CD32, that was all incorporated into it and sorted.
Yeah. And of course, that was a talkie version, so really enjoyable. Really cool.
Yes,
Is that
with Chris
Barry?
Barry.
That's right.
Rimmer.
Yeah, Rimmer. Yeah. What have you been up to, Dave?
I'm still ill, unfortunately. I still can't shake this. I'm still exhausted and sore, but something has arrived through the post yesterday that I was quite excited about. We spoke about it on a previous show, and I'm holding up to the camera now a fighting fantasy book from Steve Jackson, The Secrets of Salamonis. It's actually bigger than I thought it was as well. It's a nice kind of A5 size rather than the tiny paperback you get. 368 pages. I know Neil would require to know that. 368 pages. I'm looking forward to it. And I will be certainly cheating as I play it with my fingers in several places at once.
Nice.
I went to a bookshop recently that had all the new reprints of the old ones on the shelves, and it was lovely to flick through them. And I think I'm going to make a special trip just to go and pick up that book, buy my first fighting fantasy in over 30 years.
There's two. There's another one come out as well just now on the 40th anniversary. I forgot the name of it. Chrissy linked it to me and said, "Did I buy that? Or was it Asnawar? Whatever it was." And there's two just come out, Secrets of Salamonis, and the one that I've forgotten the name of, who I'm no use at all. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, we've had a busy week of retro. Should we head into today's stories and see what's been going on?
Let's do it.
Our first story today, then, $1 Million Retro. A question for you guys. What's the best part of collecting retro, or anything for that matter? And this is something I touched on when I was talking about the donations just a moment ago. Is it the thrill of the chase? Is it hunting down rare items? Is it going on trips to all corners of the world to follow the lead on a one-of-a-kind bit of retro? Well, if you're a retro console collector, you can cut all that out now. You can skip the hard work, and you can pick up a job lot of every single console ever made, including all of the variants in their boxes. An instant collection for you or for a museum or whatever you want to do with it. All you got to do is hit the Buy It Now button on an eBay listing. So this story was shared with us by listener Evil B. Thompson. Thank you for submitting this story over on the subreddit. And it's about a French collector on eBay by the name of Carriuri or Carrier. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. So you'll be pleased to hear, as an eBay is selling all this, they have an eBay rating of 1,903 and a 100% satisfaction rating. Very important if you're going to part with this amount of cash, because what they're asking for is 984,000 euros. That's around 850,000 pounds or 979,000 US dollars. So round it up, we're talking about $1 million US here for what they describe as a 99% complete collection of every console ever released.
How much in Australian dollars is that?
Oh, Chris, do you want to crunch the numbers while I carry on? You can.
What was the pounds?
It was 850,000 pounds.
Yeah, halve it. About 400,000 Australian. No, twice it. No, yeah, double it.
Double it?
Double it.
Have you ever been to Australia?
1.7.
Which way is it?
Million.
Which way is it? You double it to get the Australian dollars, give or take. Yeah.
Right. So about 1.7 million Australian dollars.
Yeah.
Sounds even more substantial. So, that being said, there are nice photos on the listing. I would say personally, there are not enough photos to reassure you to part with that much money, if indeed you do have that much money. The seller does have a YouTube channel, which has got some shaky hand camera footage, but again, not enough to really show off the collection as it's described. So I would certainly like to see more of it, but let's just assume that it's all legit and everything's there that is listed. What we do see is that it says it's all boxed. So, for example, you can see a shelf with every Sega Mega Drive on it. So you can see the one with Aladdin packed in, the one with Outrun packed in, every variant you can see there. And there's also every color of N64, every Super Nintendo bundle, every type of Game Boy, everything. The listing says that the rest will be posted soon on the listing, which is kind of unusual for such a big listing. You'd think they'd have it all prepared from the word go to put it on there, but they've still got to add more things to the listing and update it. So it's worth checking back. He says that it will soon include on the listing all the Neo Geos, the NEC consoles, and a whole lot more. 2,250 consoles in total. It's a lot of kit. So I suppose the first question to you guys is, if you had the money and if you had the space, would you pull the trigger and press the buy it now button? Dave?
No, and it's not because I don't have any respect for consoles and console fans and games and so on, but I never had consoles. I never grew up with consoles. Just through chance, I always had computers, so I don't really have any link to these. So I don't have any nostalgia for them, any attraction, so I'm not the right person for it. It was always... I had the CPC and then the ST and then PCs. So through that, I've got a link to the Apple II that I read about in Dragon magazines, C64 and Spectrums that I read about at the same time as the CPC, and obviously the Amiga because of the ST. And then anything kind of too far outside of that, I don't really find a connection with. But as for the listings, anyone that knows me will know that I complain loudly about people looking for eBay prices for Gumtree effort. And what I mean by that is people who don't put a lot of effort in and expect great results. So they'll work out roughly the total of all the items they have, assuming they get a fantastic price on each item. They add it all together, add some on top, and then through fantasy and delusion, put it on eBay and expect to get a wonderful price for it. And I think that's what's happened here. He's looking for €450 per console, and I'm sure there's some rare stuff in there, but there's also lots and lots of common stuff. And when I look at box console prices on eBay, there's no way it will come out as $450 on average. On top of that, there's hardly any effort going into the listing. So would anyone drop $1 million in that, Neil?
Well, I think, you're right, €450 per console. You would expect some kind of bulk discount for buying them all at once, wouldn't you?
Yeah. If I'm going to put a listing up for $1 million, I'm going to hire a photographer. I'm going to make sure that listing has everything in there. Hiring a photographer is the minimum you would need to do, unless you can do it yourself. I mean, what he's put on there is really low effort.
Get a local YouTuber involved, or even a film crew. Get a walk around of everything. You'd want an hour-long video just pulling boxes off of shelves and just really showing off the quality of it. Yeah,
you'd even be phoning eBay and say, "Look, eBay, you don't allow this, but for this listing, can you allow it?" Surely they would be happy to do it for the publicity. But
what are the fees like? Do you think?
Well, they're going to make £100,000 on it. The final nail in the coffin, though, is that I don't see an Amstrad GX 4000 there. So if he's going to sell a complete set of consoles, where is the best one?
Well, I mean, this guy is based in France, so I think it's a given that there's going to be an Amstrad GX 4000. They had so much love
see it.
for the Amstrad. It's got to be there.
But I have a suspicion that there's no actual intention to sell. I think it's just someone showing off their collection. He's gone to all that effort, so let's put it up on eBay and show people. If someone hits the buy it now button, I'm sure he'll be laughing all the way to the bank. But I don't think he's selling this because he needs to sell it. I don't think he needs the money back. I think this is a way of showing it off, perhaps.
Do you think so? A lot of money would have been put into that collection over the years. I don't think it would have been $1 million, $1 million US gone into that. So, yeah, it's difficult. There's a delight in finding new and unexpected things in places you don't expect to find them, whether it's car boot sales or charity shops or a poorly listed eBay listing with a spelling mistake or Gumtree, whatever. That's all part of the hobby, I think, hunting things down. And I really enjoy that. And, I'm in this wonderful situation where things actually get donated to me. And I don't think that takes anything away from it, because you've got that whole excitement of, well, what's going to be in the box? What have they got? When that Odyssey turned up that I mentioned earlier, I was just gobsmacked. So there's a huge amount of delight in all these different ways of collecting retro, one piece at a time. Now, you could argue that you've worked incredibly hard your whole life to raise $1 million and you'll spend it the way you want to spend it. That's fine, but it feels a little bit like cheating, doesn't it? I think it would be nice to split the lot out and let people pick and choose what they want. He may find that he makes even more money by splitting it out, but it would be he could take a year off work and treat it as a full-time job, couldn't he? Selling his collection, he would easily cover his wages selling all that, and you could make sure it gets into the hands of the people that want all of the individual bits. So it feels a little bit, I don't want to say lazy.
Lazy is the right word.
You think lazy is the right word?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, a little bit lazy.
We've agreed that there's far, far, far from what should be sufficient effort put into this.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Chris? Would you buy this?
No. When everybody, somebody says, what would you do with $1 million if you had it? I'm always reminded of the movie Office Space. Do you guys remember that?
Lovely film.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I won't tell you what the guy says he'd do with $1 million, but there's one certain thing. But in all honesty, if I had $1 million, I'd buy, well, in fact, you could buy 2 Ferraris, brand new, spanking new Ferraris. Nice 458, nice 488, in fact. That'd be fantastic. That's what I'd do with the money. Certainly wouldn't put it into this, but maybe if I was collecting to set up a museum or something, then of course you would look at it differently to what you would do as an individual with money like that. I'm glad you did the numbers there, Dave, actually, because I was sitting there. This is why I had a confused look on my face earlier while Dave and Neil were talking. I was bashing away at my calculator going, I was using the American dollar value, and I was going, but that's $440 per console. That's not worth it. For most of the collection, that's probably not worth it. So yeah, I don't know. That's my
on top of that. Do you really want to have a Sega Mega Drive with one pack in and the one 6 months later with a different pack in game? No. Is that why would you?
No.
It's not for me to gatekeep and say what people want and what people don't want, but I would find it difficult to think you'd want to have, I don't know, a dozen different Sega Mega Drives with the various different pack-in games on them.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a museum or something.
If I were in the market, or anybody in Australia, the dollar exchange rate against the pound is actually in our favour at the moment, so it actually comes out to 144,000. 1.44 million. That's right. So that makes it worth it. Let's do it.
I understand the argument. Just to push back on what Dave was saying, that it's for the completionists. That's why you would want every variant, because you want to complete the set. And I'm talking to a man here in Dave that sat in front of a wall of video games. And how much did you want to complete your set of Ultima games on that shelf, Dave? You wanted to fill those gaps.
I do not have on the shelf the Ultimate 8 and then the Ultimate 8 speech pack and then the Ultimate 8 with the speech pack. I don't have duplicates that way. I don't have Ultima 7 and then the Ultima 7 complete one. I don't have compilations and the games, and I don't believe that's right for my collection to do that. So maybe that's why I don't think this way.
Right, fair enough. So you don't have to have Ultima 7 and then Ultima 7 on the Super Nintendo and then all variants of it.
No,
just one to complete the set. Yeah,
I have seen other people doing that. So maybe I should wind my neck back in here. Maybe I'm projecting my own personal preferences onto other people. I shouldn't do that. So you're right.
Well, you heard it here first. Dave winds his neck in.
It will come out later on, I promise.
So, I think if I had $1 million US to buy this, I'd probably spend that money on probably a building, probably a dedicated museum building. Maybe I could buy the mill in its entirety, although that's going to be a lot more than $1 million, I think, to buy a mill of that size in the Cotswolds. But a space, and then continue to collect in the way that I am, discovering new things each week, fixing things up, knowing each thing that goes on display intimately because I've worked on it and I've researched it and I've made a video about it. And I like that whole process. I really do enjoy it. But you know what? I think there could be someone out there who would make a big offer on this. Remember that company we talked about recently who were trying to buy every single video game that came out, and they had a bunker or whatever that they were putting them in? Where was that? Was it in Scandinavia somewhere? I think it was. They were
Sweden.
Collecting everything. In Sweden, was it?
Carlsbad, maybe?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if someone like that swept this up. Maybe they'd put in an offer for $500,000 or something. They'd maybe get themselves a good deal, but nobody else has the room for it all, surely.
And if you're a collector of these things, then why would you would assume you already had some of them, or most of them, or many of them at least, so you're then having to buy a lot of duplicates.
Well, there we go. If you're interested in taking a look at it, the link to the eBay listing is in the show notes, so go and have a look and check back periodically to see how it's evolved. And Well, who knows? If you happen to be the person out there that hits the button and buys it, we'd love to have you on the show to tell us all about what you're going to do with it. It's a long shot. It's a long shot, but let's put the call out there. Maybe we can have you on as a future guest.
As you guys know, I won myself a C64 in a raffle, and I've had some fun with it, playing some games and getting to see what all the fuss was about. Apparently, these were quite big in America and Australia. But you know what it's like. If there's no nostalgia attached to a system or a game or whatever it is, sometimes certain machines become little more than shelf space or a nice, display piece, while you try and come up with a good reason for owning them or another reason to use them. Well, if you too have a C64 collecting dust, a guy called Linus Åkesson from Sweden has the perfect solution. You could turn it into a theremin. That's right. Your SID chip could soon be singing the theme tune to Star Trek while you wave your hands around above in the air, hovering a foot or so above the bread bin of awesomeness. So Reddit user Senior by 445 dropped us a link to Linus's video on YouTube, in which he happily shows off his Theramin 64 whilst playing Amazing Grace, in fact. He then goes into telling us not so much how this is put together. That's in more detail in his blog. Instead, he rather expertly gives us a tutorial on how electricity flows and how electrons are manipulated across a gap, or capacitance is essentially what he's talking about. And he does this to explain in principle how a theremin works, and in fact how most devices are designed to not be a theremin, or in essence to not be influenced by us waving our hands around near them, which ordinarily would in fact affect the flow of electrons to a degree, if not designed out. It's some pretty high-level stuff that he's explaining, but he's explaining it very well in layman's terms. So what do you need to make your own theremin? Well, all you need is 2 555 timer chips, 4 resistors, a spoon, and a clamp, which look just like a G-clamp, and of course a C64. The very simple circuit constructed is connected to the C64 via the user port, on pins CNT1 and CNT2. His blog details how he's written some software to basically detect the signals received by the 2 antenna circuits, which are the clamp and the spoon. But he doesn't actually show the code. And again, we'll include a link to his blog as well. He's in fact more explaining the principles behind the code rather than the code itself. And that's where I start to go a bit blurry-eyed, if I'm honest. So I'll jump back to my comfort zone and simply say, this is cool. And it just amazes me that somebody like Linus would wake up one day and go, hang on, I could make a theremin out of a C64. And he goes and does it. Why is it cool? Because it's not just a theremin. He could have just made a theremin, but it's a theremin using the SID chip. So it has that C64 sound to it. That's cool, right, Neil?
Oh, it's cool. And when you listen to the performance on the video, it sounds like, I guess, one channel of the music that you would have got from a lot of C64 tunes, the sort of background noise. I'm just waiting for the drums to kick in at any point and get those nice crunchy C64 drums alongside it. But
nice.
Yeah, maybe you can develop it that so we can hit a key for them to come in. There's all sorts you could do with it. But it sounds great. It sounds like pure SID, pure C64 when he's performing it. He's definitely got the theremin face down to a T. When you watch people perform with the theremin, there's a face they pull. It's you know the one I mean. When you watch it, just look for theremin face. And I can't believe you introduced this whole story today, Chris, without mentioning Doctor Who.
Oh, of course.
You can't talk about theremin without mentioning Doctor Who and that theme tune.
Yeah.
Other nominations could have been Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. At a theremin. There was Mysterons by Portishead. I was about to say more recent one, but it was in the 90s, so not so recent.
Was that to do with Captain Scarlet then?
No, it wasn't, Dave. It wasn't, Dave. Nothing to do with Captain Scarlet. But yeah, there's a lady, or there was a lady, she passed away in the 90s, called Clara Rockmore, who is considered to be the best theremin player of all time. So if you want to follow up your research, having seen the C64 one, go and watch Clara. Again, you can see theremin face in action. And just to take a sidestep here and go off on another tangent, because I love the SID chip. I love the music that comes out of the C64 and all of the composers that just make it sing, like Rob Hubbard and people like that. However, is there a danger that the SID chip is becoming what historically will then be remembered as chiptune music, even though there are many other audio chips out there from the era?
Yes.
Is the Dave straight in there? Is the popularity of the SID going to mean that others are forgotten about and chiptune is SID? Is that a danger?
Yeah, I think the SID is the best sounding of the 8-bit chips that we get used to. The SID chip, the AY is great, but the SID chip's a little bit better. The Atari Pokey is unique, and those Atari arcade games that use the Pokey are fantastic. But the SID's probably the best one, but it's ended up being the SID's the only one that people talk about, and it's a bit of a shame.
Mm-hmm. No, it is a good point.
Yeah, when you hear chiptunes being used in pop music every now and then, it sort of comes in waves. Every now and then chiptunes become popular again and they appear in the charts. It always sounds like a SID chip, or it'll be some kind of plug-in for whatever modern music package they use, which is geared around the SID chip. So yeah, let's stand up for the AY and the other sound chips. But anyway, let's get back onto the story. Chris, tell us more.
No, I mean, you raised a good point. It should have been the far superior 128K Spectrum and its AY chip. Absolutely. Made some more enemies. But no, as mentioned, he plays Amazing Grace. It's not the theme tune to Star Trek, which is the first one I go to in my head, but you've raised some other good alternatives there, Neil, which is great. In theory, I'm wondering, he could use different voices or sound effects. Excuse my sort of lack of knowledge on this side of thing, but it doesn't have to be the particular sound that he's chosen to use from the SID chip. Surely he could pick a different sound effect, and then you're still using the mechanism of how you play a theremin, waving your hands about in the air like a lunatic, but you're using those other sound effects to actually get the tune. That would be quite cool. And then my mind's going, well, surely. Sorry, Neil, you wanted to jump in there?
Well, the SID chip has a lot of filters on there which you can adapt and change. So I think we're talking about things here where he's just produced a first prototype and gone, look, it's possible. So all of this isn't for any lack of trying. He probably just hasn't got round to it yet. So we're not talking down the project in any way.
Not at all.
But you could get some of those filters sort of sweeping as he plays and things like that. There's loads that can be done, and as you say, different sounds would be lovely, and bringing in drums and all the rest of it. I'm excited. I hope he continues to work on it.
Yeah, and another place my mind's gone on this is, I mean, essentially what he's done is create an external peripheral, is really what he's done. The C64 is still a C64. So could you do this for other machines, such as the Amiga? Could you do a version, make a theremin out of an Amiga so that it's the sounds of Paula and the different sound effects, or even, MIDI samples or whatever? You could have a theremin demo party.
No, you could. I mean, in the case of the Amiga, the SID chip is really a sound generator, so it creates those waves. Whereas the Amiga, it can be made to sound like that, but it's more geared towards playing back sampled sounds, isn't it?
Yeah,
PCM sounds. So I'm sure you could still make it happen, but there's a bit more soul to the SID chip for this kind of project than you might get out of Paula, I think.
Yeah, true. Well, what I'm thinking is if you're using something like Pro Tracker, you can use your Amiga's keyboard as a keyboard or a piano keyboard, in essence. So you're then using the mechanism of waving your hands around for the theremin to choose your note and your volume, which is how you play a theremin, but it's the sample that it's going to play. So you're absolutely right. Yes, it is sampled, but you're still using the same actions. It'll be an interesting exercise. What do you reckon, Dave? Could you do it with an ST?
Finish the sentence.
or are they more useful propping open a toilet door?
You can't put that in the show notes and then leave it out. So, first of all, I love the sound of the theremin. As the video says, it was commonly used to indicate something otherworldly in films, and I think I've seen so much of that over the years that I've got an instant Pavlovian response to hearing the theremin now. It's code for something otherworldly. You hear it in Star Trek, in in Doctor Who and so on, but it was also used in incidental music and kind of ambient sounds as well, just to indicate that it's a trigger response now to indicate otherworldly. I love it. There's nothing else that sounds quite like it, and I wonder, have we heard, has Theramin disappeared recently? Have we heard it really since the 90s?
Well, we haven't, but I've just been doing a little bit of hunting because I had to look for this after Chris raised the Amiga and interfacing this peripheral. If you take a look at wave-theramin.com, it's a MIDI Theramin off the shelf that you can buy.
There you go.
So there you go. You can plug in your MIDI Theramin and use it with any MIDI-compatible device or computer or whatever. So there's your in for Pro Tracker.
There it is.
And it says at the bottom, made in Australia.
Where's the buy now button? Only an Aussie would do this. Probably got attacked by drop bears and was having some rehab time in hospital. Crazy. Cool.
As for the Atari ST, I misunderstood. I thought this was what you did to a broken C64. So I was going to say, no, you wouldn't want to do this to an Atari ST because they're already so accomplished for music. And as a wee side note, just before we continue, the Atari ST can actually emulate the SID chip, and there's a few ST demos of it, which are quite cool. But a working Atari ST is the source of pretty much all of the music you hear in the 90s. And I think Chris is a secret Atari ST fan because he set me up with this question. The ST had MIDI ports and the system timing was bang on. It had a crisp, high-resolution mono screen. It had a fast CPU and had all this out of the box. So any proper music studio had an Atari ST, maybe paired up with an Akai S1000 or S950. And as Fatboy Slim said, they changed his life. And I hope that Hoffman talks about sometimes getting an ST, so I hope that Hoffman gets an ST and an Akai. Imagine what he could produce with that. But, Neil?
Imagine if it had Blitter. Carry on.
An Atari STE then.
There he goes.
Now, don't worry though. I don't want Amiga fans to be upset. The Amiga still has its place. And I recently read an article in The Guardian that gave the Amiga praise for being a poor man's studio. And what they meant was that people who couldn't afford a proper setup of an Atari ST with a sampler, etc., could do it all to some degree with an Amiga with its Pola chip. Obviously, it's not as good, but you could get by with the lowly Amiga, the cheap Amiga on its own, and make some great music.
The Amiga had
there you go,
didn't it, Dave? Neil? Like, it was just a cheap external add-on.
You could plug them in, but the ST was always touted for its perfect timing, so that's why people like them in the studio.
Yeah.
But well, Dave's neck is no longer wound in; it's sprung out like a jack in the box. There he is. He's back. I knew it wouldn't last long. I can't let this go without also mentioning another project that we talked about on the show. I think we talked about it on the show way back. There was a lady by the name of Jerry Ellsworth who made a bass guitar with a SID. So you had the neck of the bass guitar and then the whole Commodore 64 where you would have the body of the guitar, and it looked brilliant and it sounded brilliant. So that's another one to look at. That's over on Hackaday. I will make sure Duncan's got the link to that for the show notes so you can see even more SID goodness.
I mean, the whole point is the machine is working, yep. So it is still a working C64 in this project. And the mod is fully external from what I understand. So, it's not something to do with a broken machine. It's a working machine. So in theory, you could do it with an ST, Dave, and you could use MIDI as well to get any voice, give any voice to the Theramin. So that would actually be really cool. Back to the original project, the circuits look simple enough for even me to put together. Neil, you want to disagree with that?
No, and sorry, I left. I accidentally didn't. So when we're recording, we've got this little button we can press, which is a virtual raising of your hand to say I want to talk. So we try not to crash over each other's vocals. I forgot to unclick it. Sorry, I was just sort of waving my hand around in the wind needlessly. I put it down now. Carry on.
That's all good. Yeah, the whole screen bounces up and down just so that you guys know as well. So we do see it in the corner of our eye. We go over to you, or however we can throw across. But these. I've said before, I don't really have the confidence to put together complex projects, but these circuits look easy enough even for me. And I even played with 555 timers during my GCSEs all those years ago. But knowing where to begin with the code is a whole other thing. So I did ask Linus if he'd be releasing the software, and he explained that and these are his words, releasing the program involves a bit of work. As a debugging aid, there are sprites moving across the screen to visualize the parameters, but the sprite graphics are just random garbage from memory, so the screen is a mess. He did also say, though, if at some point I release the software, then I will release the source code too. So there is that hope. Linus did also very kindly gave us permission to use images and a scroll of his web blog, as well as footage from his video. It would be tempting to put some of the Amazing Grace into this edit, but I'd rather just send traffic to his video. So please do check out his blog and his video as well, and hear the tones of Sid being played as a theremin. It's really cool to watch.
Floppy disks in Japan. Minister declares war on old-fashioned technology. And just what we need, another war. Japan has declared war, and it's on the floppy disk, according to a story on the BBC submitted by Go2GoSub. Their subheading is Japan's digital minister has declared war on floppy disks and other retro tech used by the country's bureaucrats. Now, unfortunately, I'm too old and fat to enlist in the army, so I won't be joining the fight for my disks. Personally, I love my discs. I know where I am with them. I'm very, very fond of using discs, and I really don't enjoy disc replacement, Gotex and flash floppies and so on. I don't like them at all. Neil, do you use discs in the cave, and do you like them? Would you like to use discs? I know that you don't on the systems you've got out, but would you like to?
Well, I'm just, before we go on, I'm just wondering if we keep saying the word war, how the YouTube algorithm's going to react to this. If it's going to bury our show away, or if it's going to promote it for a bit of hype, I don't know. So we'll soon find out. War. So yeah, discs. Do I use discs? I do use discs. I mean, you can't avoid using discs for setting up certain machines. And every now and then people like to just put a floppy disk in and enjoy using a floppy disk. However, I'm not averse at all to Gotex and floppy drive emulators for the convenience of them. I've got no problem with them whatsoever. Especially, I guess the ideal setup, an ideal example is either the CPC 6128 I have, which has 3-inch discs, and it's just a flick of a switch to switch between the external emulator and the internal drive to use a disc, or the Amiga 600, where you've got a compact flash card in there as the hard drive, but you can just put a floppy disk in. I know a compact hard drive is not comparable to a floppy disk, but you can still put a floppy disk in to load from it while still enjoying all the benefits of WHD load when you want to. So it's nice to be able to, but I've got no problem with people using floppy emulators. Now, I had a little look on Amazon because I wanted to see if new 3.5-inch discs were still available readily. Turns out they are. There's lots out there. There were some TDK branded ones, some Imation branded ones. They were the first ones that came up on Amazon. I'm sure if you look further afield, you'll find lots more. Of course, these are new old stock, so reliability of them is going to depend on a lot of factors, such as storage conditions. I did try to see if anyone was still making them in 2022. The most recent I could find was Sony, who it appears ceased manufacturing them around March 2011. And it said in that particular article that I found, as recently as 2008, Sony was selling 8.5 million floppies in Japan alone, which is quite surprising for a country that brings us so much technical innovation. But like us, they also have a strong office culture, so probably adhere to the same if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, and drag things out, systems out far longer than they should be. It's the same the world over, really. So perhaps not so much of a surprise. But I would be interested to hear if any listeners know of any more recent manufacturers of floppy disks. Is there one still out there making them, or when was the last? I'd be interested to know. However, going through the Amazon listings, it was on the Imation box of new discs. When you look at Amazon, you've got reviews, and just above the reviews, you've got questions. So potential buyers can ask a question of the seller. And the question at the top was, "Hi, I have purchased these diskettes, but it's been so long since I had them. Which way do you slide the little square to use the diskette?" I mean, what are they doing? They're talking about the little metal thing at the top that you slide to reveal the disk, but that's just done automatically when you put the disk into the disk drive.
Do they mean the right protect notch?
Do you think that? Do you think they mean the right protect notch?
Oh, maybe.
Am I being generous?
you can use the disk whichever way the square's round. You know, it just means it's
That's
write
odd.
protected or not. I don't know, but if you'd used them before, you wouldn't forget something like that, would you?
No.
But maybe this is representative of the kinds of questions, because there are generations now that never used a floppy disk. And
Yeah.
quite rightly, why would they have done? Other than clicking the save icon.
And I should point out the trope that everyone toes out here, just to get out of the way. Yes, we use the save icon for a floppy disk, even though it's been generations since we used it. Yeah, it's been said. I thought I'd do a little bit of research. And where else to go but the biggest floppy disk retailer on the internet, floppydisk.com. They sell new old stock ones. They sell new loose disks. They sell them in bulk. They can recover information from damaged floppy disks, and they also recertify used floppy disks for reuse. I've used them before to buy floppy disks. I bought 5 1/4 and 3.5 inch double-sided, double-density ones, not the high-density, more recent ones. These are the older ones. So I reached out to the owner, Tom Persky, with a few questions, because I wanted to make sure I understood things correctly, rather than just come out with statements that are unfounded. So I wanted to dispel some misconceptions about floppies as well. So he confirmed that as far as he's aware, and I guess he should be aware if they are, floppy disks are no longer being manufactured. That there are plenty of stocks available, new and unused and sealed and checked and reformatted. The best place to get them worldwide is, I think, floppydisk.com, and Tom said they try their best. I asked if drives are still being made, because I didn't think so, and he confirmed he doesn't think so, but there still may be drives made in China, but he doesn't think so. And my suggestion there is that they're recycling slim drives from laptops. So what some places in China do is with e-waste, they take old computers and they strip them down, and they'll take some chips off them, they'll take some drives off them, and the USB slim external floppy drives that you buy on eBay, I think they are made from recovered laptop drives.
Well, we did find evidence of that. Was it? I can't remember who was buying them. If it was yourself, it might have been Richard in the build.
It was
down
me.
At Eva. It was you, was it? Yeah.
I sent one to Pillock, and he took it apart, and I'd not taken it apart. He took it apart and he found rust on the drive. So it had been one that had been presumably recovered from a laptop and put in the shell. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, it seems ethical to do that rather than to make new stuff when they can reclaim it that way. So that's a good example of e-cycling.
Well, you say you use the word ethical, but you don't know the conditions of the people that were having to recover these things and put them together. But yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
As opposed to putting them into an incinerator and then making a new one in the factory down the road.
Yeah.
Now, I also stated my opinion in floppy disk, which was that floppy disks that have been stored correctly and were manufactured properly are still entirely reliable, and most of the problems come from contaminants or improper storage. And he agreed with that, and he said that no physical media is entirely reliable. Floppy disks, CDs, DVDs, flash drives, SD cards, and even hard drives fail. The disks we sell are performing about as well as they did 20 years ago. So he's saying that there's no difference now in floppy disk performance than there was when they were still being used 20 years ago. He said floppies have always had a 1 to 2% failure rate, so they are not a good choice for storage of info. We have a floppy disk transfer service that is able to transfer more than 80% of the information on disks that are more than 20 years old. If the disks were stored correctly, we have an excellent chance of getting the data off old floppy disks. So thank you very much.
Just if the disks are stored correctly, what are the ideal conditions for storing floppy disks?
So I've done my own research into this, and I've got some conclusions here. So I did it into the more rare 3-inch floppy disks that were used in Amstrad CPC and PCW, and also in the Spectrum Plus 3, among other places. So I got hold of 258, which is a huge number of these discs because they're much more expensive than 3.5-inch floppies. They're maybe 3 or 4 times the price for a new 3.5-inch floppy to get a used 3-inch. So I got 258 from eBay, from various different places. 152, which is 59% of them work correctly. 68, which is 29%, had a small amount of errors, but were still usable if you avoided those errors on the disk, if you marked those sectors as bad. And 38, which is 15%, were unusable. And every damaged disk showed signs of contamination from dirt or more from water condensation. Neil?
Well, I'm going to say this because if I don't, a listener will. That's 103%, Dave.
There'll be
I think you
rounding errors in there.
I think you meant 26% of them had a small amount of errors. You said 29.
Oh, sorry, did I say 29?
Yeah.
I meant to say 26. Sorry. Thank you for pointing that out, because if you didn't, there would be several comments. So yeah, I found that every damaged disk showed signs of contamination. Now, most of the time it was water, but sometimes the disks were filthy, and when the disk is filthy, it gets inside. But most of the time it was water condensation, and I was able to tell because the little metal shutter had a little bit of misting on it, had a little bit of residue from where condensation had formed and then evaporated and dried out. So I found that it's the storage that matters. So presumably in the UK at least, they were taken out and put in the garage where they got very cold and then warm and then very cold and very warm, and water formed, evaporated, condensated on them, and that's what damaged them. Chris, how do you feel about discs, and do you like using them?
I do actually enjoy using them, but also emulated solutions, which I'll get onto. I have to bring up, though, Dave, the Guardian also ran with this same story, because we do live in copy and paste journalism, and the image that they ran with was an Amiga 500 with the disc sticking out, which was pretty cool to see. But yeah, same story. But yeah, I mean, if I'm firing up the A500, mainly because my A1200 doesn't have currently a working floppy disk drive, because that needs cleaning. But my A500 squeaky clean disk drive. So every time I throw a disk in it, I make a point of checking the disk and what I think of the quality of the disk before I put it in the drive, because I don't want to contaminate the drive and thereby transfer muck onto future disks or onto the heads. So what I do is I actually I put the disk in a disk cleaning caddy, and I turn it. So not to clean it necessarily, because if it doesn't need cleaning, don't touch it. But I turn it and I feel for grinding or resistance or nasty noises. And then I'll also, because the disk cleaning caddy has opened that metal sheath, I can also have a bit of a quick visual inspection. If I'm a bit paranoid, what I'll actually do is, and I'll be honest about this, I'll throw the disk in a PC drive because they're easier to replace. And I'll let that spin up and I'll have a listen. Is that sounding smooth or is it sounding nasty? And only if I'm happy then will I throw it in my A500 drive. Dave?
Where would someone get one of those 3D printed kits to view the disk surface and make sure it's not damaged, Neil? You're muted.
Hello. Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Did you ask me a question?
Yes. Where would someone buy one of those 3D printed kits so they can view the disk surface, potentially clean it, but to see if it's damaged? Where would they buy one of those?
Well, I would direct people to my store, but we're out of stock at the moment. So maybe in future you could go to rmcretro.store.
eBay is what Neil means. Go to eBay. Loads of places in eBay. Don't go to RMC Retro Store. They're unreliable.
There we go. Dave was trying to help Neil out with that was a completely unplanned plug. But if we're going to be plugging, funnily enough, so the disc that I most recently threw into my A500, which I did do a video on, so that'll be dropping around the same time as this episode. There we go. There's my plug. But it's Shadow of the Beast. So I've got Shadow of the Beast long box. First time I've actually owned it, and I made sure I checked the discs and threw it in. And so going back to, discs versus emulation, yes, I have fired that up on the A1200 and I've played it in emulation, but there was something amazing about getting the discs out of the long box, throwing them in the A500, hearing that thunk as they make contact and they drop down to be read, and knowing that game has fired up from these 30-year plus old discs out of the box is just a completely different experience. But I have no issue with GoTech either. I use that as well. It just makes sense. I use actually GoTech as infinite blank disks. That's my main use of it. So I can just store information on them. Yeah.
As for 3.5-inch discs, I bought thousands probably, and buying used ones on eBay, Atari ST or Amiga ones, is a real lottery, and it's not. I don't think it's worthwhile, because the majority of them I bought, the actual majority of them, have errors on them, because I think they've been chucked into garages or lofts where they've got cold and warm over 20 or 30 years, and they're now junk. So I that's why I went to floppydisk.com and got them from there. They're not that expensive. Now, it's not just the floppy disk that he's against. It's other obsolete technology like the fax. And despite how I feel about the preservation and the use of retro stuff and the real joy I get from using discs, I do actually agree with him. I think he's right. There is no reason to use floppy disks now or faxes, and they should be replaced. I'm a technology enthusiast, and I know that many, if not most, of the viewers are. So the truth is that in the real world, things need to move forward. Get rid of the fax machines, get rid of the discs, move on to better technology that speaks to other parts of the technology. Labour is expensive, get rid of it using that technology. But nobody will take my disc from me. I'll be using these discs forever.
Time now for our community question of the week. So let's just remind ourselves as to what the question was last week. It was a question of, it was about sealed retro, wasn't it? Retro tech and games. So we were talking about whether or not you should break the seal on your retro, the dangers that might be happening inside in terms of cables perishing, batteries leaking. And we've just talked about floppy disks. Should you open up and test your floppy disks and make sure, for example, staples aren't turning to rust, as we found in an example we talked about last week. So we put the question out there, and you faxed in your answers to us. And we're now going to read the top 3 over on the subreddit. Let me open the link here, because I am down to read the first one. So that's quite a short answer at the top from STFM. Dave, is that you under a different name?
No. In fact, it's not me. It's nearly my view on it, but I will still buy sealed games.
So STFM's take on it is very short. He just says, yes, I don't buy sealed anyway. There are too many fake sealed items for sale with inflated prices these days.
I should really come in with a comment that someone left on the YouTube video last week that I thought was quite pertinent. Mm-hmm. Sealed games open the door to fraud. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if you faked a box of, let's say, a Super Nintendo game, where there's not so much reason to open it up if you've got an EverDrive type thing? If you faked a box, the best way to save you the effort of faking the stuff inside it is to seal it up, to make sure nobody actually opens it up, and you can put a block of wood in there, and scrap of cardboard instead of open it up. So I hadn't thought of that at all, but there must be out there sealed games that nobody will ever open because it devalues it, and in fact they're frauds, and inside there's nothing.
Well, do you want me to tell you a little bit of a secret there, Dave?
Yes.
There are at least 2 games, big box games on the shelves in the store that I'm sitting in front of, that don't have the right games discs in there, because somebody just sent me a pristine looking box without a game in it. And I thought, well, that's such a nice thing to look at. I've got to put it on the shelf. So I just put some blank floppies in there, so at least people can take it off the shelf and have a look.
I feel lied to.
You've told us, Neil, that if someone said to you that they wanted to open up one of the sealed games, you'd quite happily let them open up one of the sealed games.
Would.
Just not one of those.
You just issued a challenge to people to go into the cave, go into the shop, pick up a game and see if they can work out which one has the fake discs, and then ask you to open up and find out if they're right.
But now this is still authentic, because if you think back, what's happened here is somebody's gone to the shop, bought the game, swapped the discs out, returned the game because they've kept the game they really wanted, and then it's been resealed. So it's authentic.
So it's not the shop.
Instead of Shadow of the Beast, they got Ed the Duck.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Who wants to read the next answer then?
Dave can go.
So, Springy NZ1, so I'm thinking Springy from New Zealand, Depends. Games are meant to be played. Yes, they are. But if you have a sealed copy of Ultima 4 and a downloaded version, why not keep the copy sealed? But if you don't have any other way of playing the game, rip it open, away you go. Now, I don't agree. If I want to play Ultima 4, I'm not going to use the disc in the box, but I'm going to use the cloth map, and I'm going to use the manuals, and I'm going to use the guide there.
Yeah.
The whole thing for me about these big box games is that the box and the contents add so much to the experience, and playing the game and using the PDF manual and scans that you get from good old games, it's not quite as good. So yeah, I think the whole point is open them up, use the manuals, use the maps, all those kind of things, read the novella, all those kind of things. It gets you into the game a lot more.
Yeah,
feelies need to be felt. My answers are actually in a different order to yours, because Springy was the third answer on my list, with Thin on Top 84 as the second answer. What have you got there, Chris?
That's what I've got. So I'll go for Thin on Top 84. Sealed games should absolutely be opened. They were designed to be enjoyed through play. So keeping them forever behind plastic robs them of their purpose. These days, my aim is to play original games on original hardware in a cost-effective way. That means buying loose game cartridges, for example. I don't worry about boxes anymore. Back in the day, if there were a widespread option to buy games at a lower cost without the packaging, I probably would have gone for it. Imagine how many more titles I could have enjoyed. That's not to say I didn't enjoy the unboxing experience at the time. I used to display the original boxes and hang them on picture hooks. So one corner of my bedroom looked a bit like Neil's shop in the cave. That would have been nice to see. I don't own anything that is sealed. No, that's a good point. Yeah, fair enough. I remember thinking way back in the day, why do we have all these big boxes when, mainly when CDs were starting to become obsolete, and I was thinking to myself, they could be on a USB stick. Why do we need this packaging just to attract the eye? And guess what? Now it's gone too far the other way, and we don't even have any physical copy. You just download the game and off you go.
Yeah.
Merchandising, I think it is.
I had a browse through all of the other answers to this, and thank you. There was quite a lot of engagement on this one. I think pretty much everyone has said don't buy sealed games or break the seal and play the games. Everyone's in agreement. There's just one comment buried away in there from PC Engine Gaiden, who says, I've got a couple of sealed games, and to be honest, the only reason I haven't opened them is because they're not very good conversions. So, you can leave a sealed game sealed if it's just a rubbish game. I think that's a legitimate reason. Some things are best not opened. But on the whole, everybody wants to open them. And I think we're all in agreement here. So our community question of the week for this week, then, if you'd like to take part, head over to our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where you will find the most recent episode and the question of the week pinned at the top, and you can post your answers in there. Top 3 at the end of the week we will read out. Our question of the week this week, then, is what would you declare war on in retro? We've seen that Japan have declared war on the humble 3.5-inch floppy disk. Well, it's over to you now. We're trying to avoid modern tech, so let's not go into the realms of DLC and NFTs and all of that. We're talking about retro. So what do you want to declare war on? I've got some examples in my head, but I don't want to say them because I want to leave you to put them in the answers. But I'm sure we've all got a few things immediately coming to mind.
The Commodore Amiga.
Oh, Dave.
I don't mean it. I don't mean it. I don't mean it.
I hang up on Dave?
We can mute Dave. I think there's a button. Yeah.
So head over to our subreddit and declare war, and we'll see what kind of army assembles behind you by way of upvotes or downvotes, if not. And I'll look forward to those answers next week. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure chatting to you as always. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you're not already subscribed, head over to youtube.com/thisweekinretro and take a moment to subscribe to us, or through whichever podcast app that you use to keep track of us and follow us, so we know how many listeners are out there and who we're talking to, because we really do enjoy making this show as we edge ever closer to show number 100. We have had some suggestions for what we should do for the 100th show, including the suggestion of a live show. How do we feel about that?
Well,
sure. The only problem with the live show is, when can we do a live show that people would like, that people can actually listen into? Because we record this at a time where most people couldn't watch it.
This is true. But of course, it would still be uploaded as normal for people to listen to.
Yeah.
But we could try and make that happen. So we've got 8 more shows to figure that out. So we will certainly let you know in good time what we're going to do to celebrate the big 100. Looking forward to it. Thank you as always. Take care and bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave, Chris from 005 AGIMA, and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.